He thought he was untouchable. He thought 20 years of marriage was just a line item on a balance sheet he could delete. When Robert Calloway, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar logistics empire, handed his wife divorce papers on her 50th birthday to run off with a 22-year-old Vogue cover model, he thought he had won. He kept the penthouse, the yacht, and the company. But Robert made one fatal miscalculation. He forgot who actually built that empire. He didn't realize that while he was busy looking at a pretty face, his wife was looking at the fine print. This is the true, brutal story of how one man's midlife crisis turned into the greatest financial revenge plot in New York history. Grab your popcorn. You aren't ready for this ending. The champagne in the flutes at the Pierre Hotel Ballroom was Dom Perignon vintage 2008, costing roughly $400 a bottle. But to Robert Calloway, it tasted like tap water. He stood near the ice sculpture, adjusting the onyx cufflinks on his Brioni tuxedo, scanning the room not for his investors, but for a signal on his encrypted phone. Beside him stood Catherine. At 49, Catherine Calloway was the definition of old New York elegance. She wasn't flashy. She wore a midnight blue velvet gown that whispered money rather than shouted it. She was the woman who had sat on the floor of a garage in Queens 20 years ago, packing boxes, while Robert drove the delivery van. She was the one who negotiated their first loan from J.P. Morgan when Robert was too terrified to walk into the bank. "Smile, Rob," Catherine murmured, her voice calm, her hand gently resting on his forearm. "The board is watching. You look like you're waiting for an execution." Robert flinched. He pulled his arm away, subtle but sharp. "I'm fine, Catherine. Just a headache. The merger with Ocular Logistics is stressing me out." "I told you," Catherine said, sipping her water. "Ocular's books are cooked. Their debt-to-equity ratio doesn't make sense. If you acquire them, you're buying a sinking ship." "I didn't ask for your audit. Catherine," Robert snapped, his voice low but venomous. "I'm the CEO. You haven't been operational in this company for 10 years. Go talk to the wives. I have business to handle." Catherine froze. The insult wasn't the words, it was the dismissal. For 2 decades they had been partners. Even after she stepped back to raise their twins, she was his shadow advisor. Every night he would bring the contracts home and she would redline them. But for the last 6 months, silence. Late nights at the office. Emergency trips to Milan and Dubai. She watched him walk away, disappearing into the crowd. He didn't go to the board members. He went to the terrace. Catherine, driven by an instinct she had tried to ignore for months, followed him. She stayed in the shadows of the heavy velvet curtains near the balcony doors. Robert was on his phone. His voice was hushed, but the winter air carried it clearly. "I know, baby, I know. It's done tonight. Yes, I have the papers in the car. No, she has no idea. Listen, Natalia, the penthouse is yours. I'm kicking her out tomorrow morning. I love you too." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. Natalia. The name had been floating around the tabloids for months. Natalia Voss, 22 years old, the face of the new Chanel campaign, a Russian-born sensation with legs for days and a reputation for dating men with net worths exceeding 9 figures. Catherine didn't cry. That was the thing about Catherine Calloway. She didn't get sad. She got efficient. She stepped back from the curtain, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her face composed. She walked back into the ballroom, found the waiter, and took a glass of champagne. She downed it in one swallow. Then she walked out the front door, hailed a cab bypassing their chauffeur, and went home to their triplex on 5th Avenue. She didn't pack her bags. She went straight to Robert's home office. Robert was arrogant, but he was also sloppy. He assumed Catherine was tech illiterate because she preferred handwritten notes. He didn't know she had a degree in forensic accounting from Wharton, a degree she had put on the shelf to help him build his dream. She sat at his computer. He hadn't changed his password. Natalia 123. "You idiot," she whispered. She began to dig. She didn't look for love letters. She looked for assets. She opened the folder marked Project Alpha. What she found made her stomach turn. It wasn't just an affair. It was a liquidation. Robert had been quietly moving funds for 6 months. He was setting up offshore accounts in the Cook Islands under a shell company called Voss Holdings. He was draining their joint liquidity. He was planning to leave her with the houses, which were heavily mortgaged, she realized with a shock, and take the cash. He wasn't just leaving her. He was bankrupting her. He was going to serve her divorce papers tomorrow, likely claiming the business was failing to lower her settlement while hiding the real cash overseas. Catherine heard the front door elevator ding. He was home. She closed the laptop, wiped the fingerprints, and went to the master bedroom. She changed into her silk pajamas and got into bed, turning off the lamp. When Robert crept in an hour later, smelling of expensive cigars and another woman's perfume, Catherine lay perfectly still in the dark. She breathed rhythmically, pretending to be asleep, but her eyes were wide open. "You want a war, Robert," she thought. "I won't just divorce you. I will delete you." The next morning, the sun hit the marble floors of the penthouse kitchen, illuminating the perfect life that was about to shatter. Robert walked in, wearing his power suit, a charcoal Tom Ford. He didn't pour coffee. He placed a thick manila envelope on the granite island. Catherine was already there, drinking tea. She looked fresh, rested. It unnerved him. "We need to talk," Robert said. He didn't sit down. "Okay," Catherine said, turning a page of the Wall Street Journal. "Is it about the ocular merger? Because I really think I want a divorce." He said it like he was ordering lunch. Catherine slowly lowered the paper. She forced a look of shock onto her face. "Rob, what?" "I'm unhappy, Catherine. I have been for years. We've grown apart. You've become boring. You're obsessed with the kids, with charity. I need vitality. I need life." "Vitality," she repeated. "Does vitality have a name?" Robert sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Her name is Natalia, and before you scream, yes, we are in love, and yes, she is moving in." "Moving in?" Catherine stood up. "Robert, this is my house. Our children grew up here." "Actually," Robert smirked, a cold, cruel expression she had never seen before. "It's the company's house, and as of this morning, the company has reallocated housing benefits. You have 48 hours to vacate. I've booked you a suite at the St. Regis for a week. After that, you're on your own." "On my own, Robert. We have been married for 20 years. Half of everything is mine." Robert laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. "Talk to my lawyers, Cat. You signed a post-nup 10 years ago when we went public. Remember? To protect the shareholders. You get a stipend. You get the cottage in Connecticut. But the company? The stock? The accounts ironclad. You get nothing." He checked his Rolex. "I have a flight to Aspen with Natalia. Have your things out by Friday. Oh, and don't try to access the joint checking. I've frozen it to prevent spite spending." He turned on his heel and walked out. The elevator doors closed. Catherine stood in the silence of the $40 million apartment. She didn't scream. She didn't throw a vase. She walked to the counter where she had left her phone. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 15 years. "Simon. It's Catherine Reynolds. No, I'm not using my married name anymore. I need you to come out of retirement." Simon Halloway was the most feared divorce attorney in New York in the 90s, known as the Grim Reaper of Madison Avenue. He had retired to fly fish in Montana. Cat. His voice was raspy. What's wrong? Robert is leaving me. He's hiding assets in the Cook Islands. He thinks the 2014 post-nup is valid. The 2014 post-nup, Simon chuckled. The one he had his corporate counsel draft, the one where he failed to disclose the Project Gemini assets at the time. Exactly, Catherine said. But it's worse. He's merging with Ocular Logistics. There was a pause on the line. Ocular. That's a Ponzi scheme wrapped in a tech company. If he merges, he exposes the entire Callaway portfolio to federal scrutiny. I know, Catherine said, her eyes cold. I tried to warn him, but he wouldn't listen. Now I'm going to let him do it. Catherine, Simon warned, if he merges the stock tanks, you'll lose your settlement value. I don't want the money, Simon, Catherine whispered. I want his reputation. I want him to stand in front of the world and admit he's a fraud. I want to buy the pieces of my company back for pennies on the dollar. That's dangerous. He gave my home to a 22-year-old Instagram model, Simon. Dangerous is all I have left. The tabloid storm hit 3 days later. Robert didn't just leave quietly. He made it a spectacle. The New York Post ran the headline, Callaway trades in for a new model. There were photos of Robert and Natalia on a yacht in St. Bart's. Natalia in a micro-bikini, Robert looking tan and fit, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, Tech King finds love with the hottest face in fashion. But the articles about Catherine were vicious. Robert's PR team had been working overtime. They painted Catherine as a depressed, recluse housewife who had let herself go and refused to support her husband's vision. They released photos of her looking tired without makeup walking the dog. The contrast with the airbrushed photos of Natalia was brutal. Catherine moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment in the West Village. It was a far cry from the penthouse. She had no staff, no driver. Her friends, the socialites of the Upper East Side, stopped calling. They went where the money was, and the money was with Robert. Only 2 people visited her. Simon Halloway, her lawyer, and her daughter Sophie, who was home from Yale. Dad is disgusting, Sophie said, pacing the small living room. He sent me a Cartier bracelet to apologize. I threw it in the trash. Mom, why aren't you fighting back in the press? He's destroying your name. Catherine sat at her small dining table, surrounded by stacks of financial documents. Sophie, never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. What mistake? He's winning. He's on the cover of Forbes next month. Look at this, Catherine said, sliding a paper across the table. It was a transaction report. Robert is buying Natalia things, a lot of things. So he's rich? No, Catherine said. He's rich in stock. He's not rich in cash. To buy Natalia the penthouse, the Ferrari, and the engagement ring, yes, they are secretly engaged. He had to take out a margin loan against his shares in Callaway Systems. Sophie looked confused. What does that mean? It means, Catherine said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips, that he borrowed money using his company ownership as collateral. If the stock price of Callaway Systems drops below $120 a share, the bank will issue a margin call. They will force him to sell his stock to pay back the loan. He will lose control of the company. But the stock is at $180, Sophie said. It's stable. It is, Catherine nodded, until the Ocular Logistics merger goes through next week. You think the merger will fail? I know it will fail, Catherine said, because I'm the one who tipped off the SEC. Sophie's eyes went wide. Mum, you didn't. I sent an anonymous tip to the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding irregularities in Ocular's accounting. They are launching an investigation on Monday morning. The same morning, Robert is scheduled to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange to celebrate the merger. Catherine stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had cast her aside. "He wanted vitality," she whispered. "He's about to get a heart attack." Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp, blue sky optimism that usually signals a disaster in the financial world. Robert stood on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange. He looked like a king. His suit was custom Italian silk, his teeth were bleached white, and on his arm hung Natalia. She wore a white dress that looked suspiciously like a wedding gown, a calculated move by Robert's PR team to signal a new beginning. Below them on the trading floor, traders bustled about. The giant screens flashed the ticker symbol, C-SYS Callaway Systems. Current price, $182.50. "Just smile and wave, babe," Robert whispered to Natalia, squeezing her waist a little too hard. "My feet hurt," Natalia muttered, checking her reflection in the glass of the balcony. "How long is this going to take? I have a fitting at 2. "This moment," Robert said through gritted teeth, "is going to make us billionaires. Not just millionaires. Billionaires." The countdown began. 10. 9. Robert grabbed the gavel. He felt invincible. He had shed the dead weight of his wife. He had acquired Ocular Logistics, the hottest AI shipping tech in the valley. He was the future. 3, 2, 1. Clang. Robert brought the gavel down. The bell rang. Cheers erupted. Confetti rained down. For exactly 3 minutes, Robert Callaway was the master of the universe. Then he saw it. It started in the front row of the trading floor. A trader looked at his terminal, then grabbed his phone, his face draining of color. Then another. Then a murmur rippled through the crowd, growing into a roar. Robert looked up at the giant CNBC screen mounted on the wall. The Chiron had changed from Callaway merger official to breaking news in bright red. Breaking FBI and SEC raid Ocular Logistics headquarters. Allegations of massive accounting fraud. Robert felt his knees unlock. What? On the screen, live footage showed agents in windbreakers carrying boxes out of the Ocular offices in San Francisco. The news anchor's voice cut through the celebration like a knife. Sources say the tech unicorn has been fabricating shipping data for 3 years. The company is effectively worthless. Callaway Systems, having just finalized the acquisition this morning, has absorbed 100% of this toxic debt. Robert turned to his CFO, Mike, who was standing behind him, furiously typing on his BlackBerry. "Mike? What is going on?" Mike looked up, sweat beading on his forehead. "The stock, Robert. Look at the stock." Robert looked at the ticker. $182.50. $160. $145. It was free falling. "Stop trading," Robert screamed, leaning over the balcony. "Suspend the stock." "We can't," Mike hissed. "The algorithm is dumping. Everyone is dumping. Institutional investors are fleeing." Natalia tugged on his sleeve. "Robert, people are looking at us. You look sweaty. It's gross." "Shut up," Robert snapped, shoving her hand away. "Don't you understand? I just spent $2 billion on a company that doesn't exist. $130. His phone buzzed. It was a private number. He knew who it was. The bank. "Mr. Callaway." The voice was cool, robotic. "This is the risk management desk at Sovereign Bank. We are monitoring the price of Callaway Systems." "It's a glitch," Robert lied, his voice trembling. "A temporary panic. It will rebound." "Sir, as per your margin loan agreement, you are required to maintain a collateral coverage ratio. With the stock hitting $125, you are in breach." "I have money," Robert stammered. I have the offshore accounts. We are aware of the Voss Holdings accounts in the Cook Islands, the banker said. Robert's blood ran cold. How did they know? However, due to the federal investigation into Ocular, a global freeze has been placed on all associated assets. Your liquidity is zero, Mr. Calloway. $118. So here is the situation, the banker continued. You have 1 hour to deposit $40 million in cash to cover your position. If you do not, we will begin liquidating your personal stock holdings to cover the loan. You can't sell my stock, Robert screamed. I'm the CEO. If you sell my shares, I lose majority control. You have 59 minutes, Mr. Calloway. The line went dead. The next hour was a blur of frantic terror. Robert ran out of the exchange, leaving Natalia behind to deal with the paparazzi. He jumped into his limo. "Get me to the office," he screamed at the driver. Inside the car, he opened his laptop. He frantically tried to move money. Crypto crashed. The Hamptons house. He had leveraged it to buy the engagement ring. The yacht leased. He realized with a sickening jolt that he was asset-rich and cash-poor. He had spent the last decade acting like a billionaire, leveraging every asset to buy the next one. It was a house of cards, and Catherine had been the glue holding it together. Catherine. She was the only one who kept cash reserves. She was the one who insisted on boring savings bonds. He dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. He called his friends, the guys he played poker with, the guys he took on private jets. "Hey Jim, it's Rob. Look, I'm in a tight spot, need a short-term bridge loan. 5 mil, whoa. Sorry Rob, bad timing, I'm tied up. Click. Gary Buddy. Listen, whoa. Rob, I see the news. I can't be associated with an SEC investigation. Don't call me. Click. They weren't friends. They were parasites, and the host was dying. By the time he reached his office, the stock was at $90. The bank didn't wait an hour. They started selling. Because Robert's stock was the collateral, the more the price dropped, the more stock they had to sell to cover the loan. And the more they sold, the more the price dropped. It was a death spiral. Robert burst into his office. Security was already there. "Mr. Calloway," the head of security said, looking uncomfortable. "The board has convened an emergency meeting. They voted to suspend your executive powers pending the investigation. You can't do this. I built this place. They want your badge, sir, and your laptop." Robert stood there shaking. He handed over his badge. He walked out of the building he had built onto the sidewalk of Manhattan. It started to rain. He hailed a cab. He no longer had a driver and went back to the penthouse. He needed Natalia. She had connections. Maybe her wealthy friends in Europe could help. He burst into the apartment. "Natalia, we need to leave. We need to go to your place in Milan." The apartment was in chaos. Suitcases were open everywhere. Natalia was throwing clothes into them. Chanel, Gucci, Hermes. Natalia. She looked up. Her eyes were red, but not from sadness, from rage. "My card was declined," she spat. "I tried to buy a ticket to Paris, and the black card was declined. Do you know how embarrassing that is? Baby, it's temporary. The accounts are frozen. We just need to ride this out." "Ride it out?" She laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Robert, I checked Twitter. You're broke. You're worse than broke. You're in debt." She zipped up a Louis Vuitton bag. "I'm going to stay with Luca. He's in town." "Luca? Your ex, the DJ. He has a private jet that actually flies, Robert. Yours has been repossessed." "But I left my wife for you. I gave you everything." Natalia stopped at the door. She looked him up and down with pure disgust. "You left your wife because you were bored, and I'm leaving you because you're poor. It's business, Robert." She slammed the door. The sound echoed through the empty mortgaged penthouse. Robert sank onto the white leather sofa. He put his head in his hands. The phone on the coffee table buzzed. It was a text from the bank. Notice of foreclosure, 432 Park Avenue penthouse. You have 30 days to vacate. He had lost the company. He had lost the girl. He had lost the house. And then he remembered the one thing he might still have. The cottage in Connecticut. The one property that was in Catherine's name, but maybe she would have mercy. It was raining harder when Robert arrived at the small West Village apartment building where Catherine was living. He was soaked. He had walked 40 blocks because his credit cards didn't work in the taxi. He buzzed the intercom. "Catherine, it's me, please." There was a long silence. Then the buzzer buzzed. He walked up the 3 flights of stairs. Catherine was standing in the doorway. She wasn't wearing a gown or pajamas. She was wearing a sharp-tailored business suit. She looked powerful. "You look terrible, Robert," she said, stepping aside to let him in. The apartment was small but cozy. It smelled of jasmine tea. It smelled like safety. Robert collapsed onto a chair. "It's gone, Cat. Everything. The company, the accounts. Natalia left me." Catherine sat opposite him, her hands folded on her lap. Her face was unreadable. "I know, Robert. I've been watching the news." "I need help," Robert pleaded. "I have legal fees. The SEC is going to indict me. I need to sell the Connecticut cottage. I know it's in your name, but if we sell it, we can split the money." "No," Catherine said. "What, Catherine, be reasonable. I'm going to prison if I don't get a lawyer." "I am being reasonable," Catherine said. She reached for a folder on the table and opened it. "You see, Robert, you can't sell the cottage, because I've already leveraged it." What? "I took a loan out against the cottage 3 weeks ago," Catherine said calmly, "and I used my settlement stipend, and I liquidated my 401k. "Why, to buy shoes?" Robert sneered, his old arrogance flickering for a second. "No," Catherine smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "To buy stock." Robert stopped breathing. "When your stock crashed this morning," Catherine explained, "it hit a low of $12 a share. Panic selling. Everyone wanted out. But someone had to be buying, right? I bought, Robert. I bought thousands of shares every time it dipped. And then I made a call to an old friend." "Who?" "Do you remember David Thorne? The CEO of Apex Logistics, your biggest rival." "You called Thorne." "I did. I told him that Callaway Systems was currently undervalued and ripe for a hostile takeover. I told him that if he bought 40% of the company, and I pooled my 11% with him, we would have a controlling majority." Robert stared at her, his mouth agape. You teamed up with my enemy to buy my company." "No, Robert," Catherine corrected him. "I teamed up with a competent businessman to save my company, the company I built while you were playing celebrity." She slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is a press release. It goes out in 10 minutes. Robert looked down. "Apex Logistics acquires controlling stake in Callaway Systems. New board appointed. Interim CEO named Catherine Callaway." You're the CEO," Robert whispered. "Interim," Catherine said modestly. "Until we clean up your mess. David Thorne agreed that the company needs a leader who understands the books. And since I'm the only one who actually read them..." Robert fell to his knees. He began to weep. It was a pathetic, broken sound. "Cat, please. I'm sorry. I was stupid. I was going through a phase. Take me back. We can run it together. Please, I have nothing." Catherine looked down at the man she had loved for 20 years, the man who had thrown her away like trash. She felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of the divorce papers on her birthday. "You don't have nothing, Robert," she said softly. She reached into her purse and pulled out a single key. You have the delivery van. Robert looked up. What? The old 2005 Ford delivery van, the one we started the company with. I kept it in storage. It's parked outside. It's fully paid off. It's the only asset you have left that isn't frozen. She stood up and walked to the door, opening it. I suggest you take it. You have a lot of deliveries to make if you want to pay for a public defender. Catherine, please. Goodbye, Robert. The first night in the van was not the worst. The first night adrenaline was still pumping through Robert's veins, a toxic cocktail of denial and shock that kept the cold at bay. He parked the 2005 Ford E-Series under the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, convinced that by morning this would all be revealed as a clerical error. He slept in his Brioni suit, curled up on the metal floor, where Catherine used to stack boxes of microchips in 1999. It was the fourth night that broke him. It was a Tuesday in November. The temperature had dropped to 34 degrees. Robert had run the engine for heat until the gas needle hovered dangerously close to the red line. He couldn't afford to refill it. He had exactly $42 in cash, the contents of his wallet, when the accounts were frozen, and he had spent 12 of those on a prepaid burner phone because his iPhone service had been cut. He woke up shivering his breath, pluming in the dark, stale air of the cargo hold. The smell of the van was a mixture of old motor oil rust and his own unwashed body. His suit, once a symbol of his dominion over the world, was now wrinkled and stained, the silk lining tearing at the armpit. His burner phone buzzed. It was his public defender, a harried, overworked man named Frank Miller, who looked like he hadn't slept since the Reagan administration. Calloway, Miller's voice crackled. I got news from the district attorney. Did they drop the charges? Robert asked, his voice raspy. He sat up, hitting his head on the low ceiling. Did they realize I was a victim of Ocular's fraud? Robert, listen to me. Miller sighed. You signed the acquisition papers. You signed the Sarbanes-Oxley certifications. Ignorance isn't a defense when you're the CIO. They have you on negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. But they aren't going for prison time. Robert let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Thank God. Okay. So I can rebuild. Hold on. They aren't going for prison because the SEC wants to make an example of you financially. They are offering a plea. You surrender your CPA license. You are barred from serving as an officer or director of a public company for life, and you agree to a total asset forfeiture to pay back the creditors. I don't have any assets left, Robert screamed, the sound echoing in the hollow metal tin can. They took the penthouse. They took the cars. They want the residuals, Robert. The pension, the future royalties. Everything. You walk away with zero debt, but $0. You start from scratch. Or you go to trial, lose, and do 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Robert looked at his hands. They were shaking. He was 52 years old. I take the deal, he whispered. Okay. Hearing is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Don't be late. And Robert, try to clean up. You look like a vagrant. Robert hung up. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The man looking back wasn't the titan of logistics. He was a grey-faced, hollow-eyed ghost. He needed a shower. He drove to a truck stop in New Jersey, used $3 to buy a shower token, and stood under the scalding water for 20 minutes, scrubbing his skin until it was raw, trying to wash away the scent of failure. When he walked out, he saw a "Help Wanted" sign taped to the glass of the truck stop diner. Dishwasher needed. Night shift. Cash pay. Robert Calloway, who had tipped waiters more than this job paid in a month, walked inside. He didn't have a resume. He didn't have references. He just had hunger. The manager, a large woman named Brenda, looked him up and down. You ever wash a dish, honey? I ran a Fortune 500 company, Robert said, his pride flaring up one last time. Brenda laughed a dry cigarette smoke hack. Yeah, and I'm the Queen of England. Grab an apron. It's $10 an hour. That night, as Robert scraped half-eaten burgers and soggy fries into a garbage chute, he cried. He didn't sob. Tears just leaked silently out of his eyes, mixing with the greasy dishwater. He had traded a corner office for a sink, and the worst part was he knew exactly who to blame. And she was probably sleeping in silk sheets right now. Catherine Calloway didn't sleep in silk sheets. She was sleeping on the leather couch in the CEO's office, Robert's old office, surrounded by towers of forensic audit reports. It had been 3 months since the hostile takeover. The media loved the story, the scorned wife who ate her husband's company. They called her an avenging angel. They called her a feminist icon. But inside the boardroom it was a knife fight. David Thorne, the CEO of Apex Logistics, and her partner in the takeover, was not a benevolent savior. He was a shark who smelled blood in the water. He didn't want to save Calloway Systems. He wanted to strip it for parts. Catherine, be reasonable, Thorne said, pacing the length of the conference room table the next morning. The brand is toxic. Calloway is synonymous with fraud. We sell the customer list to FedEx, we liquidate the warehouses in the Midwest, and we rebrand the tech. We can walk away with a 200% return. Catherine sat at the head of the table. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp as flint. She took a sip of black coffee. No, she said. Thorne stopped pacing. Excuse me. If we liquidate 5,000 people lose their jobs, Catherine said, her voice steady. Drivers, warehouse packers, shift managers, people who have mortgages, people who didn't buy 22-year-old models' diamond rings. This isn't a charity, Catherine. It's business. You're letting your emotions drive the car. My emotions? Catherine stood up. She walked over to the whiteboard where Thorne had drawn a liquidation timeline. She picked up a red marker and drew a giant X through it. You think I bought this company to kill it, David? I bought it because I know how it works. I wrote the code for the original logistics algorithm in 1998. I know where the fat is. We don't need to fire the drivers. We need to fire the bloated middle management Robert hired to stroke his ego. She threw a thick binder onto the table. I've spent the last month auditing the payroll. Robert had 42 vice presidents. 42. Most of them were his drinking buddies or consultants who did nothing. I fired all of them this morning. Thorne's eyes widened. You fired the executive suite, cleared the floor. That saves us $30 million a year in salaries and bonuses. Next, I renegotiated the fuel contracts. Robert was paying a premium to a supplier because he liked the owner. I switched us to a generic supplier. That's another $12 million. Catherine leaned over the table, placing her hands flat on the mahogany. We keep the name, but we change the meaning. We rebrand as Calloway Apex, the reliable choice. We focus on domestic ground shipping. Boring. Slow. Profitable. If you stick with me, David, I will give you a solvent company in 2 years. If you try to liquidate, I will use my 11% stake to tie you up in shareholder lawsuits until the stock hits 0. Do we have a deal? Thorne stared at her. He had expected a bitter housewife. He had found a warlord. Slowly a smile spread across his face. You're terrifying, Catherine. I learned from the worst, she replied. Later that evening, Catherine finally left the office. Her driver, a quiet man named Samuel, held the door open for her. Home, Ms. Calloway. Not yet, Samuel. Take me to New Haven. Connecticut, Ma'am, it's late. I know. I need to see my daughter. Sophie was in her dorm room at Yale when Catherine knocked. When she opened the door, she looked shocked. Catherine had missed Thanksgiving. She had been too busy saving the company. "Mum." Catherine stepped inside and hugged her daughter. For the first time in months, the armor cracked. She held on to Sophie, tightly smelling her shampoo, grounding herself. "I'm sorry," Catherine whispered. "I've been so busy." "It's okay," Sophie said, pulling back. "I see the news. You're kicking ass, Mom. But are you okay? You look thin." "I'm fine," Catherine lied. She sat on the edge of the dorm bed. I needed to remember why I'm doing this. Sometimes in that building, I feel like I'm becoming him. I look at the numbers and I forget they are people. You're nothing like him," Sophie said fiercely. "He did it for vanity. You're doing it for survival." "Have you heard from him?" Catherine asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and unwanted. Sophie looked away. "He emailed me. From a library computer, I think. He asked for money. Said he needed it for a suit for a job interview." "Did you send it?" "No," Sophie said, her voice hard. "I told him to sell the Cartier bracelet he gave me, the one I threw in the trash. I told him he could go dig it out of the landfill." Catherine flinched. She had raised Sophie to be strong, but seeing that hardness directed at her own father, even a father like Robert, was painful. "He's suffering, Sophie." "Good," Sophie said. "Let him suffer." Catherine drove back to the city in silence. She realized then that revenge wasn't a straight line. It was a grenade. It destroyed the target, but the shrapnel hit everyone standing nearby. 6 months passed. Winter turned to a slushy grey spring. Robert Calloway had graduated from dishwasher to delivery driver. He wasn't working for Calloway Systems, he was blacklisted there. He was working for a gig economy app called Zippy, delivering food on a bicycle, because the van had finally died. The transmission blew out on the Long Island Expressway, and he had abandoned it on the shoulder, walking away from the last remnant of his past life. He rented a room in a basement in Astoria, Queens. It was the size of a closet with a mattress on the floor and a shared bathroom that had black mold on the ceiling. He paid for it by delivering pad thai and burgers to the wealthy residents of Manhattan. The irony was a physical weight he carried every day. He would cycle down Fifth Avenue, passing the building where he used to live. He would look up at the penthouse windows, wondering who lived there now. One rainy Tuesday, his app pinged. "Pick up Le Bernardin. Drop off 15, Central Park West. Office 402. Customer C. Reynolds." Robert froze. He stared at the screen raindrops blurring the text. C. Reynolds. Catherine's maiden name. She was using her maiden name. His heart hammered against his ribs. He should cancel the order. He should throw the phone in the gutter. He couldn't let her see him like this, soaking wet, wearing a neon yellow vest, 20 pounds lighter, and aged 10 years. But he looked at his earnings for the day, $34. Rent was due tomorrow. If he didn't pay, he was on the street. He accepted the order. He picked up the food, an expensive seafood lunch, from the service entrance of the restaurant, where he used to be a VIP. The maitre d' didn't recognize him. Robert kept his head down, his helmet on. He cycled to the office building. It wasn't the Calloway Tower. It was a sleek boutique office block overlooking the park. He rode the service elevator, up the smell of wet wool and expensive food, filling the small space. He reached Suite 402. The glass door read, Reynolds Foundation. She had started a non-profit. Robert stood there, his hand trembling as he reached for the intercom. Just leave it at the desk, he told himself. Drop and run. He buzzed. Delivery for Reynolds, he mumbled into the speaker. Come in, a voice said. It wasn't Catherine. It was a receptionist. Robert walked in. The office was bright, filled with modern art and fresh flowers. It smelled of success. The receptionist, a young man, pointed to a table. "Just set it there. She's in a meeting." Robert placed the bag on the table. He turned to leave. "Wait." A voice cut through the air. Robert stopped. He knew that voice. It was the voice that had whispered to him in bed for 20 years, the voice that had warned him about Ocular. The door to the inner office opened. Catherine stood there. She looked magnificent. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and tailored trousers. She looked softer than she had in the boardroom, but powerful in a different way. She stared at the delivery man in the neon vest, at the dripping water pooling on her hardwood floor. Robert kept his helmet on the visor down. He prayed she wouldn't see him. "You forgot to confirm the delivery on the app," Catherine said, walking closer. "Sorry." Robert grunted, fumbling with his phone. Catherine stopped 3 feet away from him. She tilted her head. She looked at his hands, the hands she had held during the birth of their twins. They were chapped red and scarred. She looked at the shoes, cheap, worn-out sneakers. "Robert," she whispered. Robert closed his eyes behind the visor. The jig was up. Slowly he reached up and unclipped the helmet. He pulled it off. His hair was grey and thinning. His face was gaunt, lined with exhaustion. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. "Hello, Catherine," he said. His voice was cracked. The silence in the room was deafening. The receptionist looked between them, sensing the tension, and quietly slipped out of the room. "You're delivering lunch," Catherine said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of disbelief. "It pays the rent," Robert said, trying to summon a shred of dignity. "Honest work." "I heard about the van," Catherine said. "Sophie told me." "Yeah, transmission." Robert shifted his weight. "Look, here's your food. Enjoy the lobster." He turned to the door. "Wait." Catherine walked around the desk. "Sit down, Robert." "I can't. I'm on the clock. If I'm late for the next pickup, I get penalized." "I'll buy your time," Catherine said. "How much do you make in an hour? $20 here." She opened her purse and pulled out a $100 bill. She placed it on the desk. "Sit down." Robert looked at the money. It was more than he had made in 2 days. He hated himself for it, but he walked over, took the bill, and shoved it in his pocket. He sat on the edge of a pristine white chair, careful not to get it wet. "What do you want Catherine to gloat, to take a picture, and send it to the post?" "I don't need to gloat," Catherine said quietly. She sat opposite him. "I won, Robert. I have the company. I have the reputation. I have the life. There is no joy in seeing you like this." "Then why did you call me back?" "Curiosity," she admitted. "I wanted to know. Was she worth it?" Robert laughed. It was a dry, bitter bark. "Natalia? She left me 4 hours after the crash. She's dating a soccer player in Madrid now." "I didn't mean Natalia," Catherine said. "I meant the feeling, the vitality you said you needed, the thrill of blowing up your life. Was the feeling worth the price?" Robert looked around the office. He looked at the view of Central Park, the view he used to take for granted. He thought about the cold basement in Astoria. He thought about the shame of walking into a room and being invisible. "No," Robert said softly. Tears welled in his eyes again. "It wasn't. I had everything, Kat. I had you. I had the kids. I had respect. And I threw it away because I wanted to feel younger." He looked at her, his eyes pleading. "I miss you, Kat. Not the money. I miss you. I miss talking to you. I miss the way you knew what I was thinking before I said it. Is there any chance at all I can change? I am changing. Look at me. I've been humbled." Catherine looked at him. She saw the man she had loved for half her life. She saw the father of her children. A part of her heart ached, the part that remembered the early days in the garage in Queens. It would be so easy to say yes, to write him a check, to get him an apartment, to fix him like she had always fixed his messes. But then she remembered the glass of champagne he drank while she stood in the shadows. She remembered the eviction notice. She remembered the way he looked at her when he said she was boring. She stood up. "Robert," she said, her voice gentle but final. "But I believe you are changing, and I think that is good for you. I think this struggle is making you into a human being again." She walked to the window. "But I am not the woman who fixes you anymore. That woman died the day you served her divorce papers. The woman standing here, she likes her life. She likes her freedom. And she doesn't trust you." Robert slumped. He knew it was the truth. "I understand," he whispered. "I won't take you back, Robert. And I won't give you a job at the company. That would be nepotism, and I'm cleaning up the culture you built." She turned back to him. "But," she said, "I spoke to Sophie. She's graduating next month. She didn't want to invite you. She's ashamed of you." Robert flinched as if slapped. "I told her that was wrong," Catherine continued. "I told her that her father made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but that he is paying for them. I told her that if you show up clean, sober, and humble, she should let you watch her walk." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. "This is a ticket to the graduation ceremony, and a train ticket to New Haven. It's not first class, it's coach, but it will get you there." Robert stood up slowly. He took the envelope. His hands were trembling. "Thank you," he choked out. "Don't thank me," Catherine said, her eyes cool again. "Make the delivery. You're on the clock." Robert walked out of the building. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds, casting a golden light on the wet pavement. He stood on the corner of 59th Street. He touched the envelope in his pocket. A train ticket. A chance to see his daughter. A small, fragile bridge back to humanity. He looked at his bike. He looked at the delivery app. New order, Shake Shack. $4.50. He didn't delete the app. He didn't throw the phone. He mounted the bike. He put his helmet on. He wasn't a millionaire. He wasn't a CEO. He was Robert, a delivery driver from Queens. And for the first time in 20 years, he wasn't pretending to be anything else. He pedaled into traffic, merging with the stream of yellow cabs and buses. He was invisible to them, just a cog in the machine of the city. But as he pushed his legs, feeling the burn in his muscles, he felt something strange. He felt light. He had lost the world, but he had found the ground. And from the ground, the only way was forward. Up in the office, Catherine watched him ride away until he was just a yellow speck in the traffic. She sat back down at her desk. She opened the expensive seafood lunch he had delivered. It was cold. She picked up her fork and took a bite.